everyone. We are so excited today to bring you this panel. Real estate is such a conversation right now, and there's so much information that changes daily as well as weekly and how we're operating our businesses moving forward. So we have a wonderful speaker opening up the meeting today. It's Jean Wunderlich. How many of you have heard of Jean? Can I get a show of hands? Yes. Jean is awesome. So Jean is an advocate for private property rights, homeownership, and business issues. He serves as a VP of Government Affairs for the Southwest Riverside County Association of Realtors and Legislative Liaison Executive Director for the Southwest California Legislative Council, an area resident for 30 years. Wunderlich also serves on numerous local and state national boards, including Vice Chair of Southwest Healthcare Board of Governors, President of Temecula Valley Players Theater Group, Director of California Association of Realtors Land Use Committee member of the National Association of Realtors, Murrieta Temecula Group, and is a past appointed member of Murrieta City Council. As you know, he is mayor of Murrieta as well. So Jean, I don't really know how you have any time to sleep or breathe, but thank you so much for all you do. We would love to hear what you have to share today about real estate and the state of real estate. So
thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. There's a lot of this going on. I'm going to hit a couple of highlight points. I just got off of every couple of days we have an update call from the White House. It's not the update that the president provides every afternoon with Dr. Fauci and so forth, but it includes, generally, in addition to the moderator, it includes a variety of department heads from Homeland Security, from HUD, from all the different departments chime in at some point. And so just to hit a couple of bullet points from our conversation today, the biggest thing, of course, is to remember that America is strong and resilient. We will get through this. There were about 5,000 people on the call this morning. So the other thing from Dr. Fauci is to remember that the original 2-week stay-in-home order was up about 2 days ago. That has now been extended to 30 days. And he says that was very prudent approach to extend that 30-day period for stay in place, and certainly the social distancing and the hygiene portion of it to get through this, because there are no magic vaccines or therapy. It's mostly at this point controlled by our behavior. A couple of encouraging things, of course. Well, the first is not so encouraging, but he said it will get worse over the next couple of weeks before the situation starts to improve. And as most of you probably know, you can go to Riverside County Public Health and get a daily update on cities within Riverside County and the number of cases that are existent in each city. And unfortunately, we did have one death in the city of Wildomar this morning. So it is, kind of coming our way. It would be naive to imagine that it will not impact our community. But the encouraging thing is that the number of new cases, and if you listen to Governor Cuomo in his press briefings every morning, you know that New York City is probably the hardest hit single area in our country. But the number of new cases, especially in New York City, has appeared to stabilize over the past couple days. And that's been a result of mitigation. He also reminds us that the numbers that we're seeing are based on models, and the models are based on assumptions. And so those models get modified regularly. They are currently looking at between 100 and 200,000 potential fatalities nationwide. But he said we don't have to accept that. Through our behavior, we can impact that and hopefully decrease that amount by a little bit to a lot. And again, it comes down to our behavior on that. He said we're currently in the middle somewhere of this. We're not exactly sure when it began. We are in the middle right now. And if you look at the curves that are modeled after Italy and some of the other locations that have been hard hit around the world, we're somewhere in that middle stretch. And so we will probably see a surge in cases over the next couple of weeks. Part of that will be a result of increased testing, including local testing and mobile testing like we have in Lake Elsinore right now. So we will see that increase, and then we'll and then there will be an end. So the important thing, and then Larry Kudlow, White House Finance, came on and talked about how to keep the economy going, because that needs to happen if we're going to have any kind of recovery. And then they talked, of course, about CARES implementation, the CARES bill that was just passed this past Friday and signed into law. And so I'm going to switch over right now to some of the provisions in the CARES Act for realtors. And most of this information is also available at realtors.org/coronavirus. That's the National Association of Realtors website. So again, that's realtors.org/coronavirus. So all of these provisions are in there, and they are updated regularly as well. An important thing to remember is that as of a couple days ago, real estate was declared an essential service. Prior to that, it had been some closing service, it had been construction industry were essential, and there are a number of industries which are considered essential, as put out by the Department of Homeland Security this morning in the cybersecurity and infrastructure guidance on that. So, but again, CAR, and you can get their information at car.org/coronavirus, and they've provided guidelines as to how realtors should act. In spite of the fact that we're considered an essential service, they're certainly not encouraging open houses. They're not encouraging you to load your car with buyers to go out there and trek around, to exercise best practices, because only we can impact and help flatten that curve that's out there. So some of the important things in the CARES Act, of course, is mortgage forbearance, and that extends to borrowers or government-backed mortgages. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HUD, VA, and USDA can request up to a 360-day payment forbearance without proof of hardship. There will be no additional fees, interest, or penalties can be assessed for the forbearance. And what that's being taken to mean, because again, a lot of this is still under analysis to exactly what they said, what they meant, and how that filters down to the field level. But at this point, the analysis seems to conclude that what that means is you can avoid payment of your mortgage for up to a full year, and those payments will be tacked on to the end of your mortgage. There will be no fees, penalties, or dings to your credit for doing that. So that's an important, that's a biggie. Owners of multifamily properties also have some level of forbearance. Currently, that's 30 days, may be extended up to 90 days. And as that applies to renters, there's also quite a bit that applies to renters in there. It's for renters, it's a little bit different. Right now, they're saying you can not pay your rent for up to 90 days, but at the end of that 90-day period, you may be liable for a balloon payment, or what they're recommending now is to work with your landlord, because everybody understands if you can't make a $1,500 a month rent payment for the next 90 days, you're sure as heck not going to have a $4,500 balloon payment at the end of 90 days. So they're encouraging you to talk to your landlord, work that out. You have to give your landlord 7 days notice that you're not going to be able to pay the rent. And then at the end of that time, work out a time frame and a payment schedule that's acceptable to both to take care of those arrearages. But also that evictions, there's been a moratorium on evictions, both for mortgage as well as rental payments, and evictions have been frozen, at least for the duration of this. There's a lot of information on there about assistance for Section 8 housing. Credit reporting, student loans have also been postponed. If you have any student loans, they've suspended all payments and interest for a period of 6 months right now for student loans. Another important thing for realtors, I think, is that we have been included under emergency insurance and unemployment insurance, which is unusual for sole proprietors, independent contractors, and so forth. But we are included in that economic injury disaster loans through the Small Business Administration. You can get that information at sba.gov/coronavirus. And the other thing is there is a pandemic unemployment insurance, which again is applicable to realtors out there as sole proprietors and independent contractors. So those are some very important things that impact all of us and our industry, which has not necessarily been available before as unemployment insurance. For businesses, if you have 500 or fewer employees, you can also apply for payroll protection program. And they were talking about that a little bit this morning as well, that you can apply for essentially guaranteed SBA loans, and I believe it's up to $2 million depending on the size of your business. And those loans are forgivable, and you can use those loans for utility and rent payments if need be. But the important thing is, if you maintain your payroll at a certain level going through this, then those loans will be forgivable. So that's very important if you currently run a business. Tax changes means for realtors and their family and clients below the threshold, most everybody's going to get a check for $1,200 a month, starting in about 3 weeks, they estimate, plus $500 for a minor child in your household. That's, of course, predicated on certain income thresholds. There's nothing you need to do that. That'll be based on your income from your 2018 income tax filing, or 2019 if you've already done that. So that's a little bit of help right now. Also, realtors, if you have a retirement account, you can withdraw up to $100,000 from your retirement account with no penalties. As you're aware right now, if you withdraw money from a retirement account, you pay certain interest and penalties on those withdrawals. That's been waived for the duration of this. You can get up to $100,000 on that. Also, if realtors make donations of up to $300 in charitable contributions, you can deduct those from your income taxes next year, whether you itemize or not. That's just a $300 fee right now. And if your business has 100 or fewer employees, you can also claim refundable employee retention tax credit. So a lot of information in there on that. And let's see, delay of payment of employer payroll taxes. You're probably also aware that payment of income taxes, initially it was, you still had to file by April 15th, but you would not need to pay until July 15th. That has been expanded to say now you no longer need to either file or pay until July 15th. And of course, all these things are still in a state of flux. And so that could be extended even further depending on when we're out from under this. Unemployment benefits for self-employed. I think I already covered that briefly with the pandemic unemployment assistance, which particularly applies to realtors and other independent contractors. So that's really about all I have. I will stick around and be happy to answer any questions if anybody has. I would also encourage any of you who, I don't know how many of you may have been on the MLS marketing meeting yesterday from SRCAR. We provided a lot of this same information there, but next week we will also have a guest speaker, Christian Heusrad from the National Association of Realtors, who is our advocacy task force back there, tracking the coronavirus issue and what NAR is doing. And again, it was certainly partially responsible for NAR that a lot of these realtor benefits are included in the CARES Act. And
I'd like to come by around 2 o'clock.
An essential service
to get one.
With the California Association of Realtors for getting California realtors included as an essential service. So that's all I've got to say, but thank you very much for the invitation. Good seeing you all.
Thank you so much, Gene. We really appreciate you. If you guys have any questions, please post them in the chat. We do have some co-hosts on the line here fielding questions, and we will have them at the end of the session. So thank you so very much. And again, if you are seeing all the little boxes on your screen and you want to see the speaker view up in your right-hand corner, please press the button speaker view. So next, I would like to bring on Mark Carlson. He is a real estate attorney with Carlson Law Group since 1993. He has been representing real estate professionals for nearly 25 years. He gained a wealth of experience and knowledge pertaining to the business of his clients. Mark Carlson's experience in representing real estate professionals is matched only by a few lawyers throughout California. He can understand how a particular legal issue relates not only to a litigated matter, but also how it may impact a client's general business interests. This allows him to provide advice that goes beyond a specific case or legal problem. So Mark, are you on the line? Are you unmuted?
I am now.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invite.
Can you please give us your interpretation of these new best practices for realtors and how they can CYA?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of activity in this area. I've on the risk management committee over at SRAR, and I've been within a few of their meetings such as this. So I think that the most, I think we, as Gene has indicated, we've sort of gotten through whether or not realtors can continue to do business with the CISA addendum on Saturday, which was nice. CAR of course, has taken a more restrictive position. I think they have to, sort of for political reasons. It's not a good look to have realtors out there doing open houses and showings and trying to do business as usual. So there's sort of a balancing act there about on those two topics, both open houses and showings. I think that most everybody has sort of fallen in and said, okay, doing an open house in this market probably isn't safe. So we haven't had too much, I haven't seen too much activity on, how do you do an open house and do it safely. Most of the activity has been on, and discussion has been on doing showings. And so Lloyd asked the question, what city I'm in. I have an office in Woodland Hills, and I have another office up in San Ramon. So we cover most the entirety of the state in our practice. So what we've seen is a lot of releases and addendums and different ways of trying to set up showings and give some guidance or get some guidance. I've seen networking groups where they've said certain things that I think kind of are questionable. I've seen releases from a number of the bigger franchises. And I think the pattern there really is just trying to give clients some of the information that everybody in this industry is getting. Of course, what's safe, what isn't safe, how far away you stand from one another, trying to advise your clients. If you have a seller who just kind of wants to, either upsize or downsize, that maybe it's a better idea to wait until this passes before you take that kind of a listing. Same with buyers, trying to tell them some uncertainties that we're seeing, such as lending. I actually had a client, if there's lenders that or people in the lending business at the end, I'd be interested to hear your comment. But I had a client of mine who does loans that said that only Fannie and Freddie are funding, that everybody else kind of is done. So trying to tell buyers those, alert buyers of those kind of things. So we sort of see a different, and if anybody needs some of these releases, you can do a chat or send me an email at mcc@carlsonlawgroup.com. And I've prepared 3 categories kind of releases and advisories. One is to the seller. All right, seller, you're going to have people coming through your house that you're not going to know what their background is, and there's really no good way of being able to test for that. You're going to have people that are going to be touching things, so are you going to want to clean up when you get done? You might have buyers that'll make an offer but can't get inspections done timely because people don't want to be in the house. You might have problems with the buyer not being able to get funding and not know that till the last second. So just to sort of let the seller know at the beginning, okay, if we're going to do this, here are some of the things that you can anticipate having problems with. Explaining the CAR recent addendum. I'm assuming everybody's seen that by now. On the buyer side, it's just the flip. Okay, buyer, you might have problems getting inspections done. You may not find an inspector who's willing to go into a house. You may have a seller who's unwilling to allow an inspection. Are you comfortable with doing visual inspections and getting them to acknowledge that, okay, I understand all this and I'm still willing to go forward and waive any liability. The one point on the waiver though, so it's not the silver bullet I think that most people are thinking that it is, right? If there's not a pending dispute, if you're waiving a liability, there's no consideration for that waiver. So in large part, I think those waivers are going to be unenforceable. They are, of course, great, really good evidence of assuming the risk. buyer seller, I told you that these were the risks, and if you contracted the virus and somehow can prove that you contracted it at the open house, which I think is going to be a really tough thing to do. You went in eyes wide open, and I think it'll help on liability. But it's not going to be something I think that you can go into court and just get a case like that dismissed outright. Couple other things that I've noticed in these discussions is people are trying to put the list of limitations in their listings on the public comments, which I think isn't very useful, because most people are having showings be by appointment only, so that you know who's going in and who's not going in. You just don't want people showing up in this kind of market without having some conversation. If you're trying to give a waiver or release or an advisory to the buyer, then of course you have to get that to the buyer before they go in on the showing. So having those list of conditions, to me, it just isn't very helpful. And one thing that I've noticed, I think, is going to be that I've seen or heard of a lot, I think is very dangerous, is some people in these list of requirements, I've seen it commonly stated that if you come with a child, you got to either not bring the child inside the house, or bring, have the buyer, if you're a buyer, bring husband and wife, or bring somebody with you so that the child can be attended outside, of the showing, but we don't want the kid in the house. And another one that I've heard is, okay, if you're over 65, you can't come in the house. And I'm concerned, because I know we've all seen it with fair housing violations, with race and service animals and people with disabilities. That there are people out there that will troll your MLS information, and then will file a fair housing claim against you if you say, if you're over 65, you can't come in, you can't see my house, because they would argue that would be an age discrimination, housing discrimination. So I think that it's, the best practice is in the public comments, just say appointment only, contact agent for showing requirements, get your hands on some sort of advisory about the risks of showing houses. And then another thing, if for broker owners on this meeting, my opinion is that if you are a broker with 6 agents or whatever, a handful of agents, have a call like this and say, okay, here are the things you need to be thinking about, so that you are sure that they are considering all the factors that you've learned about. If you are a broker owner that's got 100 agents or lots of agents, you probably want to put together something in writing and get that out to all your agents. And we've prepared an advisory for that purpose also. So you've got, buyer advisory, seller advisory, and agent advisory. And I think with that, it's, at least as today, these things seem to be changing every day, but as of today, that's what I'm seeing is sort of the standard on how to do this and minimize your risk.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate everything that you're sharing. We have written down your email, and I know that you also have some links on your website that people can subscribe to as well. And everybody, we will be sending you a follow-up email today with these links that are being discussed and some of these forms as well, so you'll have everything in one place. So thank you again, Mark. All right.
Muted myself. My pleasure. Thank you again for the invite.
No problem. Okay, so we are going to move on to our panel. Our subject today is adaptation, current tactics, and recovery. So our first panelist today is going to be Lloyd Mize. He is with Coldwell Banker Residential Brokerage, and he has been licensed since 1978. So Lloyd, are you unmuted?
I am.
All right, perfect. So I would love for you to talk about which market fluctuations that you may have worked through in the past, and how did you adapt through those? What were some of your tactics to come out thriving? And do they still apply to this market?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, and after listening to Gene and to Mark talk about, I have always been around, I've sought out people that do legal counsel, and they've been a part of the board of realtors, seeking out people that are leaders like Mark Carlson and Gene Wunderlich are telling you exactly what's going on. It's so critical to know how to adapt to the market. So I can't thank you guys enough for the information that you've provided us today. It's so relevant. and of course, timely. I got into the business in 1978 in April, and it was a pretty exciting thing. I was fresh out of college. My dad was a real estate broker, so I was just able to start taking listings and selling properties. And that went well until we got into 1980. So in 1978 through most of the half of that decade, interest rates were running between 8.5% and 9%. That was just where normal interest rates were. But by the time we got into 1981, interest rates were at an average of 17.5%. And I was a director at that time with CAR. I remember being up in San Francisco, and one of our featured speakers was a representative from Bank of America. And he literally stood up on stage, and there were probably a couple thousand realtor delegates in this room. And he said, you guys and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, might as well just take a 2-year vacation. Nothing's going to be happening with real estate. And I think I was 22, 23 years of age at the time. I'd been selling for about 2 or 3 years. And I just remembered how incensed I was with here this big bank is telling me and all these other real estate people to put a pause on the real estate industry. And so from 80, 81, 82, all the way through 85, we managed to do business with assumable loans, wraparound mortgages, land sales contracts, things that we're not able to use today, but we got through the business. That was probably my first awakening of no matter who's telling you how bad it is and that you must stop in our industry or any industry for that matter, you've got to find a way to get to work through that. You got to know the climate, you got to know the market. And again, working with people like Gene Wunderlich and Mark Carlson, that's the first step. You got to know the climate. So as we got into 85 and 89, the market really took off. 1985, the interest rates came back down to 10%. Markets started just really churning. Very successful years for myself. And then in 1989, the market just stopped. It was just, we were dealing with the savings and loan crisis at that time. And it's like, who turned the water off? What happened? And I had just flipped 5 houses into one big house. At that time, $500,000, and my business just stopped. I had to pivot and shift and figure out how to do business. Those were really tough years from 1990 to 1995. Finally, in 1995, I was able to sell my last house and cash out and be able to pay off all my debt, and just slowly recovered until we got back into the market in 1997 when it started picking up again. Another thing, crisis that we went through was in 1994 when the Northridge earthquake hit January 17. I had like 5 transactions that were going to fund escrow that week. So I come back in, I think it was a Tuesday after the earthquake, thinking, okay, it's business as usual, let's get going. All of the banks wanted all the properties to be reappraised. And that slowed us down for a period of about 4 to 6 months. But again, during that time, we managed to get through it. I had I think it was a 3,500 square foot office building with like a $250,000 liability remaining on the lease. I had 17 agents with me, all of them left in 1994. It was just too tough of a market. But I was able to lease the space, get back on my feet, and you keep going. 97, through 2000 were pretty good years, and then we hit 9/11. What's interesting in 9/11 is that it was a crisis. It slowed things down. It was horrible, but the real estate values in 2011 or 2000 were at I had it here. It's not coming up. Real estate values. I think the average median income or median price was like 196,000, and it just kept climbing until we got to 2004. So even with 9/11, we had a slowdown, but it didn't stop home purchases, and home values kept going on until we got to 04. And then once we got into 05, we had that huge hyper appreciation. 2005, things started declining until we got into 2007, 8, and 9, and it just completely crashed. But in 2009, we saw the market jump back up, and it started climbing again in September of 2009. And we've been pretty steady. When you draw a pencil across that or put a You measure that out from 2009 all the way to now, even though we've had ups and downs, little tiny adjustments in the market, we're still increasing at about 5% annually. So it's really what I found in my 43 years of doing this is that there's a lot of crap that's going to come at you, but you've got to know where your tribe is, where your industry is, align with people like that are on this call, and to know that we're just going to figure out a way. One of the things, Mark and Gene, jump in. I don't think we've ever had in any of these crises a $2 trillion bailout, if you can call it that, or a stimulus that provides us things like forbearances up to 360 days, a full year. Any comment on that from Gene or Mark?
I have not seen any time that kind of, even in the 2008, where the market was just, in a dumpster fire, but we didn't see anything like what we're seeing now from the federal government to try to prop the economy up.
No, that's absolutely correct, and they discussed that in the phone call this morning as well. That this is an unprecedented response to an unprecedented situation. No, there has never been this large an effort to assist such a broad spectrum. I mean, this extends from homeowners to small businesses to major businesses. And as we know, there's a lot of crap buried in that bill as well. I mean, $25 million for the Kennedy Center, and I mean, there's several billions of dollars worth of pork buried in there. But in terms of the overall approach, no, nothing in this magnitude ever.
Yeah. So we have that, and I just in closing today is that I love numbers and statistics that are real time. In the last 7 days, we have opened 287 new sales. 287 just right here in the Temecula Valley, which includes part of Fallbrook. I've included Fallbrook in these numbers. We've had 204 new listings and 304 closings. So we know that every year since 2009, we've had 8,000 listings that sell. And my sense is, just based on experience and with the stimulus, you learn to adapt with virtual showings, virtual open houses. You've got to develop the discipline of make it a discipline to calling 5 to 10 clients, past clients, people that you want to meet, and find out how they're doing. Let them know this information that you're getting from this call today, but stay in touch with people and find out how they're doing. Be proficient at things like Zoom calls, Zoom meetings, Facebook, Instagram. Work on your branding and your messaging. I remember, I think 20 years ago, our chief economist, Leslie Appleton Young with CAR, she said, the real estate economy is up to you, meaning the real estate sales force, realtors. The real estate economy, that's our responsibility to make that happen and to be protectors of that and to get that message out. So I'm pretty fired up. I've been through this a lot, and my prayer, my hope is that everybody on this call maintains their faith and you keep persevering, know the game that you're playing, and be safe.
Thank you, Lloyd. We really appreciate you taking your time to share all of your experience. So next, we'd like to bring up Desiree Johnson. He is with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. He has been licensed since 1992. All right, Desiree, take it away. Thank you for being here.
I thought 92 seemed like a long time, and then I just heard Lloyd. I'm like, oh my God. 78, I was in high school. So yeah, kind of answering those same type of questions. I've been through 3 of these cycles, the 90s, 2000 and 2008. 91 was basically when I started. So I stepped into this type of market not knowing, hey, what are you supposed to do? So I just jumped in, worked harder than everybody else, and I just worked with only buyers at that time. I think what I found is that for myself is that the market itself to me doesn't really matter. I have to just figure out who needs my help within that market. So, like in the 2000s when that market changed, I just had to change what I did. I had worked that first decade basically as a buyer's agent. That time I just switched over, okay, I'm gonna learn expires, I'm gonna learn for sale by owners, learning my scripts, learning those types of things, and made that shift then. 2008, when the thing went in the serious toilet, well, we had to learn how to do short sales, and then it was learn how to get into REO. I've always felt that regardless of the market. You just have to figure out who the consumer is, who needs my help, and how do I adjust to do it. So, I didn't know anything about short sales at one time. I didn't know anything about REO at one time. Frankly, I'm seriously having to catch up and learn social media and Zoom, all of this. So it's just a matter of adaptation. I think it's the biggest challenge I'm seeing right now with most agents is they're curling up and going into a fetal position because they just don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. So, they just go away. I've always felt that they need my help. Somebody does. So like Lloyd was saying, calling 5 or 10 of your past clients, I've sold probably a couple thousand homes in the last 30 years. So I have a pretty big client base, and I'm just calling all of them to see what I can help with. Can I deliver some prescriptions? Can I bring you some groceries? Not bringing you toilet paper because I don't have any, but that's just
what if somebody doesn't have that many clients to call? What if they've got 10? What do they do?
Well, you have friends. There's lots of people you can reach out to. There's social media is obviously a monster right now. Is getting, like you had mentioned earlier, getting your brand out there. Putting yourself out as to being the knowledge broker, being the voice of calm, and giving people the data, like you just talked about it with this call, of what's really happening in the marketplace. I mean, that's primarily my conversation right now, is letting people know that, hey, I realize everything else in your world is freaking out, but understand that property's not. Properties are staying fairly calm regardless of what the stock market's doing. We're still seeing, about only maybe 10% shift off of where we were 60 days ago. So, I think a lot of it's just learning the scripts and I will tell you, for me, it is being disciplined on my schedule, even more so now. I've always had a pretty tight schedule, but now what I'm doing is I'm breaking it into 30-minute increments all day. So I'm very specific at what I'm doing, and I have a timer and an egg timer that breaks that up and goes, okay, time to switch to the next thing. I'm going to call expireds or old expireds for a period of time. I'm going to call center of influence. I'm going to do lead follow-up. I'm going to do all those things that I do, because it's very easy right now to get sucked off into the craziness. If you actually sit there and scroll through Facebook, you'll just want to crawl in a hole. So hopefully I answered some questions. If there's I'll hang around till the end too if somebody has some questions. But
thank you so much, Destry. We really appreciate it. And yes, I completely agree with you. Keeping a regiment schedule right now is more important than ever. So Cale Thomas, we'd like to bring you on. He is with Elite Properties Direct. He's a realtor and broker and licensed since 1998. Cale, are you unmuted?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes. So along the same subject, but as well, maybe even, what are you doing in this current market to build consumer confidence, as well as how you're doing business?
First, I just wanted to do a shout out to Destry. I think he had the quote of the day so far. Who needs my help within this market? I think if we just operate from that one question, all the answers lie beneath that. But I really, really love what Destry highlighted about database, because I think this is the time to really connect in that database. And if there's a silver lining in here, there has been no better time since I've been a realtor to build rapport with people. And it's so much easier to build rapport when you are really caring about them, and there's nothing for us to sell really right now. There is more of a chance for us to check on people. I love what Destry said about, can I bring you groceries? Do you need help in any way? I think even looking at my database and seeing who owns a small business in my database, which one of those people can I deliver great messaging like what Gene had to offer us? Because we're a little bit spoiled. CAR and NAR really do a great job of taking care of us. And I must say the CAR website has been updated daily with really powerful, really in-depth information on how we can take advantage of these programs. And I've been forwarding some of that information to some of my clients. And I say, hey, I know you're not a realtor, but you own a small business, and there's a lot of small business information in here for you. Here's how you apply for SBA loans. Or if I can push out that information to my clients and be a resource that way, I think that's the work for us to do right now. Get on the phone with that database, build rapport. Because I think this whole thing comes to a head at some point this year. It could be in a month, it could be in 3 months from now. But once it comes to a head, it's going to be, not, I wouldn't say business as usual, but it's going to be game on again, in the sense that we can do some of the things that we can't do now. But we just need to, we're in the worst of it right now. I really believe that. And it was the same way in 2008 and 2009. I know that's when Tyson got into the business as well. And I think he and I were doing something very similar. And it was kind of along the lines of what Destry did. And it was, I mean, back then I was posting Craigslist ads for some of the local REO brokers. And I just call them and say, hey, can I post your listing on Craigslist and get buyers? And I was just working buyers. I didn't know any different. I was really motivated to make money back then because it was a scary time. And so I just got to work and work with buyers. But the thing is, once the market dropped and we had our footing, even though prices were horrible, there were transactions happening and there was plenty of business out there for us as realtors to do. So I think this too shall pass sooner or later. The toughest part is going to be the next 30 to 60 days. But the work for us to do is get in touch with your people. So when the dust settles, you're already very high up on their list of people that they trust. Be that connector for them, give them whatever resources you have. And then Lisa had mentioned it in the comments, and then I had posted it because I had it on my computer, but that CAR PEAD form is out. It's on car.org. I posted it in the Zoom chat notes so you guys could check that out. But I do think we're going to have to just over disclose to everybody, hey, this is what showings look like nowadays. And even though it sounds obvious, you know, I'm even telling people like, I have gloves you can wear. I'm going to sanitize the doorknobs, whatever. But we need to make people feel safe. We need to be a leader in stating best practices and make sure that everyone understands. Because I think if I have a buyer and I'm showing leadership that, hey, these are the safety protocol steps I'm taking, it makes them feel better. They just feel like, okay, Kale's doing everything he can to avoid any unnecessary problems. And so I don't know, that's how I'm handling showings, and I'm looking at guidance from car.org on a daily basis to see what's changing.
All right, well, thank you so much, Kale. I wanted to make sure you were finished with your thought, though.
I think so. And I know we have a lot of other speakers, so I'm really anxious to see what they have to say as well. And again, I'll be on for the duration if you guys have any questions for me personally.
Awesome.
Thank
Wonderful.
you. Thank you.
Well, Lisa Force, you are up next. So she is with Allison James Estates and Homes Team Force Realty Group, realtor and licensed since 2003. So Lisa, please take it away.
Gosh, I feel like I'm the baby here. Everybody else has been licensed for so long. It's awesome. We're learning. I'm just learning a lot. I've made lots of notes myself already. Some of the things you asked me to chat about were what we're doing right now in this market. And Yara and I came home from France on March 11th. We immediately self-quarantined for 2 weeks, not a question, before this even at all happened, just because. But on the 12th, I sent everybody home from the office. Nobody's in the office. Nobody's allowed in the office. I still come in daily to sanitize all the handles because I have contractors kind of coming and going. But really, like, we've stopped as physical business in the office. But the very first thing I came out of the gate and said to everyone on our team was, change your message. Stop all drips, stop any e-alerts, whatever you're using in your CRM, change the message. Our whole thing is about stop selling, start building your relationships. If you're not already building them, you should be out helping, not selling. If you haven't prepared for selling, to be in a market like this, I get it. It's hard to not sell. But we were in a little bit of a hit. Now we're back to being able to do a little bit of work. But prior to that, I mean, I just was, whatever's closing, we're going to find a way to make them close. But up till now, it's just about helping. All of our messages out to our clients are, what can we do for you? How can we help you? Is it just, I mean, we send out things like, here's some fun activities for kids. Here's some, whatever the case may be. I mean, I've got team members that are out. Matter of fact, she just delivered while I'm sitting here at the office. I just saw one of our agents brought me a big bag of masks that they made, homemade masks. A couple of girls on their team have made a ton of them. And we've delivered food to the ERs a couple times, and I'm going out to do it again tomorrow. So she brought in masks so I could take those masks to the ERs. because the local ERs all need stuff. Like, we should be out helping. We should be out returning the favor to our community right now. All that other stuff that you're building relationships right now is so key. All the other stuff, the business will come. And when we talk about the game being on, which I love that attitude, because we always talk about it at, it's game on. It should be game on now. Let's not wait for a month from now when we're allowed to really physically go out and do business. Game on now is helping the community and building the relationships. Everybody has mentioned it so far about really working out, reaching out to be helping everyone in this market, but homes are selling. I mean, if you look at it, we did a radio interview this morning, and even then I had to do some stats before that. And I said, okay, well, Riverside County as a whole is up 50% January through March in closings. Just our Temecula Valley, and when I say Temecula Valley, I kind of consider Temecula out to Hemet, Winchester up to Lake Elsinore, down like La Cresta, Duluth, back down to Temecula. 400% increase in closings from January to March. 400%. I mean, we're still the game's on right now. Like, we're still working hard. And I love that you guys have all mentioned attitude, because that's my biggest thing. Like, if you're going to crawl up in a fetal position, like I think it was Destry, somebody said that, I mean, if you're going to run from the problem and not face it head on and try and help resolve it, then you might have already had that attitude prior to this market. So nothing's really changed in your business. If you have a forward thinking attitude, I think no matter what the situation is, you're going to work through this. This is just a hiccup. We're going to get through it. It's a matter of how we're going to get through it and to do it right. Even though we are doing showings now, they're very limited. We try and do virtual, try and eliminate it all the way down, like try and narrow their research all the way down to 1 or 2 homes. And then we were already having them sign that form prior to the PEAD, but I'm glad. I was actually just making a new one last night when this new form came out. So it's kind of cool. But if they do go, like, don't bring children, it's just like Noah's Ark. It's 2 by 2. Like, there's 2 people can go in. The seller has to have the lights on, the blinds open, every door open, so that they can literally just walk in without touching anything and leave. There's face masks, there's booties, there's gloves, and there's sanitizing wipes. So you want to take every precaution, and it's not just for you, it's for them as well. So we've really been working hard to kind of overcome. And we really, like, I've Zoomed before, but I've never heard of blue jeans prior to this. And now we do blue jeans, we do Zoom. We're doing listing appointments on Zoom. And it's kind of cool. What I like about it is that, number one, we can have a business on the top and party on the bottom and stay in our living room. And so it's really nice because they can just take their camera or their computer, whatever, and show us around the house. I think it's the best of both worlds. Lisa Wayman, the 2020 mullet, absolutely. But there's everything else can be done. We can do the sign electronically. Everything else is doable if it's done with precaution, and if it's done with the other person's health and well-being in mind. And I love the new forms they came out with. We wanted to have them signed even before that. Susan over at Signature shared her forms that she was using with us. And so we were copying some of the stuff that she had and kind of incorporating it in. So it's awesome that Carr came out with one. But I guess the curiosity here is that I didn't realize this, and Jean or Mark, you might talk to this, but this actually, so COVID was going on back at the end of January. They only named it COVID-19 on February 11th. So physically, we've been dealing with this since February 11th, and our market has only increased in closings, right? And listings. We've had a dramatic increase in listings as well. So I don't know. I think for us, it's already business as usual. We're doing the virtuals. We're doing as much as we can just to narrow it down and changing the message. But my biggest thing to the team is change the message, build relationships right now, and help the community, help each other.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. You guys are rock stars. I love all the info you're sharing. All right. So next we're going to move on to Tyson Robinson with Trillion Real Estate. He is a realtor and broker licensed since 2005. Are you on, Tyson?
I'm on.
Perfect.
Okay, geez. I don't know what I could say after all of that was already shared. Geez. So I think I could just reiterate a lot of the things that were already said in terms of just be positive, great attitude. I think obviously there's a lot of negative people out there, but the reality is there's plenty of business still out there. As much as we have, and I think probably everyone on this call could say we have some buyers waiting, and we have some some sellers that are waiting to sell their home. We're also coming across many people that just need to sell or need to buy, and they're determined. So closings are still going to happen. They're still out there, and for us to essentially find those clients, we just need to continue to be working and doing our thing. And going along with that, of course, it's extremely important to just be providing value, which I think is something we should be doing it at any time, whether it's, you know, during this coronavirus thing or prior. Like, we should always be there for our clients. And I think a lot of the business and a lot of the recent listings and buyers that we've got is just because of those relationships. So I think if there was any theme from what everyone's already said, it's just the importance of providing value and building relationships. I think one of the things that I did last year that really helped give me the ability to do a few more transactions than the previous year is I put out I sent everyone knives, like some nice Cutco knives, to about 150 of my clients. And it was just random out of the blue, but it was just something fun that I thought would be cool for them all to get, and they all appreciated it. It was trying to provide something of value to them, to just show that I care for them, with absolutely nothing being requested in return. But the reality of it, whenever we are providing value, we get plenty in return in terms of business. It just comes. That's just the nature of giving, right? If we're giving and not expecting anything in return, we are going to grow our business. We are going to get more business, and they are going to refer their friends, and they're going to come back to us for more, you know, to help them in the future, because they see us as more of a resource and someone that they trust. And so that's why I think almost everyone's already mentioned this, is just the importance of providing value, reaching out to people, letting them know that we're here, letting them know that we, you know, care about them and their families. It really comes down to that. Other than that, the other thing that comes to mind for me that I thought I could share is just the importance. There's so many things we can do if we are a bit slower right now. I know that when I got into the business back in around 08, 09, I think Destry and Cal mentioned this time frame. It was a tough time. Like, this was around the time I came in, and I just hustled via posting on Zillow. At that time, Zillow didn't cost anything, and I was just posting all of our brokers' REO properties on there, posting them on Craigslist. And I helped that year 100% buyers. And I just adjusted to the time. I had my laptop, I had my mobile Wi-Fi. I was able to crank out offers, go meet clients on the fly at any moment of the day. If they called, I was there. We just have to adjust to this time. And there's a lot of little things that we can do. And if times are slower for you, where you just have less transactions and things, well, it's a great time to put together marketing collateral. It's a great time to put together a good video that will allow people to see who you really are, see if they relate with you. And in that way, you can basically do a presentation without actually doing a listing presentation or buyer presentation. I think there's a lot of little things that we can do like that to where if someone reaches out to us, a lead, someone's considering to sell, I send them my video, I send them my marketing collateral and an email, and then and links to reviews, to where they could go look through that email, look at my video, and feel like they've gotten to know me. So I think doing things along in that, I guess, area in terms of allowing your potential clients to get to know you is extremely important, just because of the fact that obviously we don't want to do very much face-to-face. Other than that, I think everyone else already shared everything I was going to say. So I'll be around also for any questions. I'd love to help in any way I can. So
thank you, Tyson. We really appreciate you. All right, next we're going to bring on Garen Parker with New Season Properties, property manager, and he's going to talk a little bit about what's going on in property management.
Hello, everybody. Hope you guys are doing great. And I think I'm the newbie. Some of you guys, well, I got started back in '09 as well, kind of hit the ground running in the property management world. So a lot of the information that I'm getting is from the CAR COVIDupdates.org website. So if you guys have that one and want to get some more updates, again, it's CAR COVIDupdates.org. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover a few of the frequently asked questions, and a lot of them, you know, obviously around rentals and rents and things like that. So first off, how is the rental market going? This is moving time, as you guys know, for buying and selling houses. This is the time people, you know, schools are getting ready to be out, and I just got updated that I heard the schools are now out for the rest of the year. My wife just told me. My boy goes to Murrieta Mesa. So schools are out, so the timeline just got moved up. People are focused on the current state of the uncertainty, but they're also looking forward and looking ahead to beyond this. So it really just depends on, I think, on how long this is going to last. Over the weekend through today, we've had over 50 leads for our tenants from our properties that are on the market for rent. So, and I've also had clients, landlord clients calling to find out a little bit more information about getting their properties rented. So we see, you know, we'll see over the coming weeks, but for the most part, there is business out there, like you guys have said. So it's there to be had. We just have to do it a little bit differently. That's all. So overall, most property management companies do have most of their marketing and everything online anyway, including their rental criteria. Of course, we still need to show the properties, so we all have to abide by the best practices as described previously by you guys. So when you're leasing a property, or when we are, you know, some important things to consider before advertising: make sure the property is sanitized. Professional cleaners are good to go through the home. Setting up rental showings, make sure they're staggered apart so people aren't running into each other. You know, you've spaced your rental showings apart, just like when you're showing property for sale. If the property is occupied, we recommend not showing it, just because there is a little bit more of a liability there. But, you know, again, make sure that it's sanitized. So during the showings, as Lisa said, keep your social distancing, but remind, you know, everybody to kind of keep their hands off of surfaces. Make sure you take sanitary wipes, things like that. And if people are going to have to be there, you know, they can kind of keep them in separate rooms, keep the social distancing. So everything's pretty much status quo for that. Just have to, you know, see how things go over the coming weeks. The big question, obviously, everyone wants to know is paying rents. Well, we all know that people are losing their jobs, and I think there's just the feedback that I'm getting from my tenants is they don't really know for sure at this point, because it's still so new. We've had probably a good 20% of our tenants already pay rent all the way up through the 31st, which, you know, they pay early. So, you know, the question is, will my tenants be able to pay rent? Well, it depends on their occupation, but there is a likelihood that a lot of them won't. So thankfully, our local and federal governments are stepping up with programs. And once again, we'll see how this pans out over the coming weeks. But people will need to take advantage of what the government is offering. This bailout money that's coming, again, it's supposed to be used for paying rents or mortgages, utilities, food, and toiletries. It's supposed to be used to be able to stay home. So that's what, when we talking to our tenants, we're giving them reassurance that, hey, you know, if you're going to have a problem, and you cannot pay. So these are some of the things that we're asking them to do is they need to declare in writing what is going on, why they can't pay due to the COVID-19, asking the tenant to retain documentation, any proof. Documentation is important for tax credits, grace period on mortgages and eviction proceedings, stuff like that. So they'll need to have that. And then record any traceable record of payments to show that this change in rent is received. So what types of COVID-19 related reasons could justify a tenant if not paying rent? Examples would be if they've been sick themselves or taking care of somebody that's sick, they've been laid off or lost hours, the tenant needs to miss work to care for a child or something along those lines. And it just depends on, you know, what their reason is for that. So we need to make sure that they give us, you know, it's just not a free-for-all to take advantage of a system It's to really provide information so we can help them, because the more information they give us as property managers, the more of that information we can pass on to the owners of their property and down the line to help the whole system as it goes. So when is the tenant required to notify the landlord in writing? I think Gene touched on this earlier. It's within 7 days of the rent being due. So today's April 1st. We'll see how it goes over the next week. Then we'll really know, because I don't think the tenants in a lot of cases know for sure what's going to go on with their businesses and with their work. Is the tenant required to provide verifiable documentation? Yes, they are. And once they get that, they'll be required to get that over to us so we can help them with that. Verifiable documentation might be termination notices, payroll checks, pay stubs, bank statements, medical bills, signed letters or statements from an employer, supervisor explaining the tenant's change in financial circumstances. Does this mean that the landlord will be waiving the right to collect rent? Gene touched on this earlier. No, it does not. There is nothing in the order that limits the right of the landlord to eventually collect all the rent that is due. So the tenant will still owe the money, the entire amount. So what we're encouraging tenants is to pay as much as they can, if not all of it now, because they don't want to get backed up on their rents. Utilize the money that's going to be coming to them, again, to stay home, pay rents, utilities, food, toiletries, things like that. Late fees, things like that, we don't recommend, property managers to charge late fees if there's reason to not charge late fees. So it just really depends on each and every situation. Each situation is going to be taken on a case-by-case basis, because again, we don't know what's going to happen. I think the longer this lasts, then it's going to get harder and harder for people. But if it's only going to last a month or 2 months or 3 months, well, I think that it might be able to work out better than we think, hopefully. We're still going to be property managers. We're still going to take care of repairs. We have vendors in line, like plumbers, electricians, people lined up. Of course, they're going to do their protections with masks and gloves and booties and things like that. But we are still making sure that our tenants are taken care of. It will be difficult at some point, depending on the professionals, whether they want to be going in and out of people's homes. But that's where it's important. If we know, obviously, that if anybody's sick with COVID-19, things like that, then we'll follow the CDC plan for that. So overall, when it comes to evictions, I don't think, eviction's a pretty strong and harsh thing to worry about. That you probably already had issues with your tenants in the past if you were going to be going down that road. Again, we're hoping this is only a short period of time and we won't even have to go through an eviction process, because again, that's a really strong process to go through, but there is a moratorium on it. I think really the main focus, if there is an eviction proceeding that needs to be addressed, you go to your real estate attorney and talk to them first. Get the legal advice on what to do, because there are certain things that you can and cannot do right now. But the most important thing for property managers is just to communicate. Communicate with your tenants, let them know you're there, be there for them. If there's a situation that goes down, you're the person in the middle between the tenant, which is our customer, and the client, which is the owner. Communicate, work it out, case-by-case basis, and it'll all work out. We're all in this together, right? So that's all I have.
Thank you, Garen. I really appreciate it. So we are just a couple minutes over 1 o'clock. There is just a little bit more info we want to get out to you. Bill Provost, are you available real quick to talk about the Fannie Freddie non-QM loan changes, and also maybe a little bit about people deferring their mortgage payments or proof of employment hurdles?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. And yeah, I'll try to keep this really brief. The mortgage business is still up and running, fortunately. I mean, we really can go completely no touch, essentially, with the exception of the appraisal and the notary. And we're working through ways on both of those. So yeah, just want to talk about some changes. I'm only going to talk about changes that are true for all lenders. We all know that there's a lot of each lender can have their own overlays and some stuff like that. You'll see a lot of that out there right now. I'm going to just talk to changes that are happening for everybody right now. I guess let's just start with conventional Conventional is an area where we really haven't seen a whole bunch of change. We're really just status quo. One thing that's true for conventional, that's true for pretty much all lending types right now, is we got to understand that I think pretty much everybody across the board is now doing a verbal verification within 3 days of funding the loan. So that's for obvious reasons. We've already had a handful of deals fall apart right there where we call for the verification of employment. They're not working anymore. You can't fund a loan for someone that doesn't have a job right now. And so know that these changes are just these subtle little changes that are being required with that end of the, I mean, we've always done verbal verifications, but they're now happening right at the end. You got to be very careful with that sort of stuff. But other than that, with conventional, it's pretty straightforward. There's been a lot of talk about what's going on with FHA and VA. The challenges with FHA and VA have really been secondary market stuff. It's kind of a la 2008 and 2009, where you know, the servicers are really worried. They're taking hits because people are getting these forbearances and they're being on the hook, and there's a lot of challenges behind that. FHA and VA in particular are a lot of lenders, and again, this is sort of overlay driven, so be careful, but a lot of lenders for lower credit scores on FHA and VA you're gonna see them just shut off on even doing those, or you're gonna see significantly higher rates. So that's definitely an area. All your VA and FHA buyers right now, you have to make sure that pre-approval is super up to date. If they were pre-approved last month, like that might as well have been 10 years ago. I mean, you've got to get that relooked at and make sure that they've rerun DU, make sure that they still have the product available and can still lock the loan, all of that stuff. And again, every lender on that's going to be maybe a little bit different. There are still, I mean, they're still down to 620 and even below. Those programs exist, but make sure that they have it available and can lock it. Non-QM, Marianne, you mentioned that. Yeah, non-QM, so that's all the alternative doc stuff, limited doc, all those sorts of things, investment properties with no doc, stuff like that. There are still a handful of non-QM lenders out there, but the majority of the sort of typical players in that market have exited. So that's another one. If you've got people that are pre-approved on anything non-QM, I mean, at this point, we have scoured the market as deep as we know, and we've only got a couple non-QM options. As you would expect, those guys are super busy. And so we're going to have to be really flexible with those types of programs. And, at some level, it's almost kind of like, hey, just stand down. And particularly for you listing agents, be careful on what offers you're accepting when someone's, you got to dig into those. If they're bank statement programs, you got to be really careful on that. Jumbo. So jumbo is, and this is the way jumbo's really always been. Remember, it doesn't matter if you're working for a bank or a mortgage bank or a broker. Jumbo is always going to it's investor specific, right? So we're always going to look to underwrite that to one specific investor. Jumbo lenders are making a lot of changes to their underwriting guidelines right now. And so that's another one. Be very careful, and it's very investor specific with those. I've seen a lot of the big jumbo lenders out there have stepped up and said, we won't do anything with less than 20% down. And we saw one yesterday came out, they've completely stopped doing anything interest only, some of those sorts of things. So again, it's an area, everybody, you gotta be careful and make sure and revisit those pre-approvals. Other than that, I think I will let Tiffany hit on the forbearance stuff. This is a very, very, very big deal, guys. We want our people to make their payments because what I'm worried about a little with some of that stuff, and again, Tiffany speak more on it, but even if it shows that, if it doesn't show a late payment, but it shows forbearance, it's unknown on a credit report, that is, it's unknown right now how lenders are going to respond to that. And so we want to be really careful about a forbearance. Look, some people are going to need it, and I understand that, but if for anybody that can at all make that mortgage payment, they need to try and do that. It's really important. All right, I'll answer. I'll keep an eye on questions out there and answer any questions, but I'm going to hand it over to you guys now.
All right, Tiffany, can you please, let me go ahead and unmute you. If you can please jump on and talk about some of these deferred payments and, you know, how it's affecting credit scores and how they can get help if they need you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I guess, you know, I started this business back in 2005. So this is the second time we've seen a shift, of course, in the market too. I will tell you the difference this time is that the CARES Act does have some protection, whereas back in 2008, 9, and 10, when people were involved in loan modifications, approved by their banks, they were making modified payments that had, and often in many cases, been solicited to the consumer without even inquiring. And the consumers in good faith were making modified loan payments. And of course, not being told that those modified payments were then going to still be rolling late on their credit because they hadn't refinanced out of the original loan. That's not supposed to be the case this time. The CARES Act does have some provisions involved to protect that. What we're keeping an eye on right now is the implementation for the Fair Credit Reporting Act, because without fail, there's going to be some major FCRA violations, essentially whereby the lender is not supposed to put 30-day lates perhaps, but will. And so we're going to be keeping a very, very, very careful eye on that. Of course, we already have strategic things in place to dispute those things off of credit should it happen. My biggest concern right now is that I am seeing an influx, a tremendous amount of clients calling who have not been laid off, who are just proactively assuming that they do not need to pay their mortgage. Lots of misinformation out there. Depending on who the loan is with, will determine what they are allowed to do. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. For example, if a consumer was already late on their mortgage prior to March 2020, many of these programs are not going to be available. And so I have clients assuming that the CARES Act is automatically protecting them. I hear clients saying automatically 90 days, some are saying 365 days. The truth is, depending on the type of loan and what the lender is going to do based on who holds and services the loan will determine what their workaround will be. So sometimes it's going to be due at the 90-day mark. Sometimes it's going to be thrown on the back end of the loan. But nonetheless, there is no policing necessarily of the actual reporting disaster that we already know will happen, just based on the lack of ability to implement what they're supposed to do. So of course, we're keeping a huge eye on that. When you're talking to your clients, to Bill's point, he is so right on when he says, you know, just because they have the agreed upon terms for the forbearance, just like back in 2010, you know, even the words loan modification on the credit report automatically kicked the file out. They were no longer able to do underwriting the same way. And of course, oftentimes that would be treated the same as a bankruptcy and or foreclosure with the mortgage underwriting guidelines. So huge, huge key there. I just wanted to mention. The other thing I'm seeing right now is that, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions about the FICO score. Consumers are under the impression that, you know what, they want to make their mortgage payment, and so they're just going to skip their Old Navy card, or they're not going to pay their revolving lines of credit because it doesn't seem as substantial. I want to caution you when you're talking to your clients to make certain that they're alert to the fact that the FICO score makes no discernment between the types of late payments. So if, for example, a client's making the decision to skip a payment on a few of their revolving lines of credit, they're still going to lose 60 to 80 points within 30 days from now. So that's a huge thing. You know, of course, a big concern that we have. You know, right now, I would say 8 out of 10 mortgage lenders that are contacting us are advising us that the lenders that they were providing loans for have increased FICO requirements to 670. So many of the hundreds of clients that graduated from our program 90 days ago are being told they need to return back to the program to get qualified again for what seems to be the most popular FICO score requirement now is 670. Of course, to Bill's point, that'll vary from lender to lender. But, you know, 2 months ago, for example, that was generally, you know, 580 to 620 was the sweet spot. We're seeing now many lenders are suggesting 670 is now the magic number. The good news in that is that the FICO score slides very, very quickly from the 580 range into the high 6s, whereas it creeps up ever so slowly from 680 to you know, the upper 700s, et cetera. So you know, obviously this is not the time for a do-it-yourself credit repair for so many reasons. You know, you can dispute incorrectly well, I don't even need to tell, most of you know, this is not the time for TurboTax or for sell by owner. This is definitely the time for consumers to be given the right information. Also wanted to mention too, there are a lot of military clients that we're working with right now that have extra provisions already provided to them. Should they be on deployment and facing any of these credit challenges, we have certain provisions in place to protect them as well. I wanted to kind of answer one more question and then I'll move forward. Oh, I am getting a lot of questions relating to settling collection debt. And I wanted to be encouraging in that. There is a wrong way to negotiate collection debt, but we are seeing that collection companies are now settling anywhere from 25 to 40 cents on the dollar, whereas before the typical standard settlement was about 50 cents on the dollar. And I would say about 8 to 10 of the individuals out there settling are allowed to pay for deletion. And of course, we all know that the deletion of a collection account is really where the FICO score soars. So I guess I'll end on the fact that, you know, at the end of the day, what makes good FICO sense very rarely makes good financial sense. And so a lot of times consumers are misguided in understanding, you know, how the FICO score algorithms work. Many of them are working to tackle their debt, focusing on debt to income ratio rather than FICO score driven information. So that's really what we pride ourselves on providing. If anyone wants to reach out to me for themselves, for their buyers, certainly would absolutely love that and welcome that. All 6 of us are of course working remotely and absolutely willing to work with you. So just reach out to our office. Our office number is 951-246-7754. Our website's dcrusa.com. And then also wanted just to let you guys know that we are licensed, bonded, and of course we are registered with the Department of Justice, which is a huge component of why we're considered kind of the go-to ethical gurus in the industry. But we can work with clients in most states with that DOJ registration. And most mortgage lenders and banks have already approved us through their compliance department to work on behalf of your clients. So with that, if you have any questions for me, certainly I'm available as well to answer.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, with Dedicated Credit Repair. We really appreciate you. I want to bring on really quick for a 30-second update. We have Matt Smith with Trust Home Inspection. Can you tell us how you're operating inspections today safely? And then following that, we're going to bring Scott Peterson just for a second. He wanted to make a comment about cleaning and keeping yourselves out of hot water with the way you're phrasing it. So Matt?
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone, for having me. A lot of great information so far. We'll keep this quick. One thing I did want to add in regards to CAR's best practices, that is great for our state. However, one thing I did note on there is if we don't follow these rules and follow the compliance at a local level, they actually can override the state rules. So we just got to make sure we follow these rules. Like everyone else said, in regards to wearing booties, wearing masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, and using Clorox wipes. So a couple of alternatives that I found have been working well for us in the inspection side is if the house is vacant or if sellers are okay with it, you could always put a combo lockbox on, let the inspector in early, and then maybe come towards the end of the inspection with the client and then do the final walkthrough. Sometimes if they don't want people at the property other than the inspector, I've also done Zoom calls and done Google Hangouts with clients and then gone around and shown them the deficiencies that I've found. And then another option I've given my clients is if they can't attend, I'll send them the report and then I can set up a Zoom call with them and go over page by page of the inspection report. I know it's not the easiest thing to do, but to make ourselves available and to be ever changing with the times, I think is important. I think overall we just need to work together. I think that all of us have concerns. Everything's unknown at this point. As home inspectors, we need to be flexible and we need to be understanding of the clients, sellers, and the agent's circumstances and do whatever it takes to be helpful. If we need to go back to the property and not charge to go back, then that's something we may need to do. So I think just being cognizant of, our health as well as everyone else's health and following the rules so that they don't put any more restrictions on us and finding new ways and alternatives, but keeping a good attitude. And like everyone else has said, is being a leader and not spreading the chaos and the fear, I think is a big point for us as home inspectors.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Matt. And Scott Peterson with Home Perfect Restoration, you had a comment about sanitation.
Yeah, just really quickly. I mean, I love all the talks of everybody taking steps to clean properties on their way out. We got to be very careful. I've seen some messages from other people saying that they are disinfecting a property on the way out, or they're disinfecting high-touch surfaces on the way out of a property. You have to stay away from using the term disinfecting on the way out. To disinfect meaning that you are killing this virus. There's nothing out there proven to kill this particular strand. And the confusion that we're seeing is there's a lot of EPA registered products that have been known to kill the coronavirus, the human coronavirus, but this is a different strand. So if you stick to your material that you're just cleaning on your way out, you should be okay. You can apply a disinfectant, but there's a lot of that marketing material going on. Some from companies that are just preying on fear that they're going to disinfect. Some are just people are not knowing the correct terminology to use. So just don't use disinfect in any of your marketing material out there. And again, if you're using like Lysol wipes, Clorox wipes, read the label. A lot of those products, they require dwell time, and in fact, for them to work. So it could be 4 minutes, it could be 30 seconds. It depends on what product you're using. So if you have questions, reach out to us for that, but just stay away from putting on there disinfecting the property, because there are attorneys that are already starting to go after people for false marketing and false advertising that.
Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate it. All right, guys, I know we've gone over, so we're going to open it up for the Q&A session. While we get ready for that, I wanted to give a big shout out to the Real Estate Power team who is in charge of putting this event on today. So you saw a few of them on the call already. Bill Provost with Franklin Loan Center, Tiffany Cross with Dedicated Credit Repair, Lisa Wayman with Corner Escrow, Garen Parker with New Season Properties, Matt Smith, Trust Home Inspections, Richie Perez with Richie's Termite and Pest Control, Scott Peterson, Home Perfect Restoration, John Ruff with Ruff and Ready Moving, and me, Marianne Sharp with Lawyers Title. All right, so my co-hosts, we have Lisa and Scott. So can you please open up those questions for our panelists?
Yes, ma'am. So most of them were covered, but if we could quickly reiterate one, because I've gotten it twice. I know that Jean went over this, but it says, are the unemployment benefits still in place since real estate is now an essential business? Jean's trying to unmute, so hold on one second.
There you go.
There you go.
It takes me a minute. Again, there are, as we've heard throughout this, there are things that are still unanswered. So the specific question again was, are unemployment benefits still covered now that real estate is an essential service?
That was the question, yes.
Don't know. Again, you know, the essential service designation came after the CARES Act was passed. And so that's one of those things that's kind of in limbo right now. It may be, but again, I really don't know. And I have a question in to NAR on that right now, but I will follow up with that and see if I can get an answer on that, because it's a very good question, and it's just one of those things that's changing as we go along.
Awesome, thank you, Jean. And just remember, things that we've covered, especially these Q&As, are going to go in the email that we're going to send out to kind of recap along with the documents and the websites as well. The next one, Tiffany, if you can just clarify the loan forbearance. Will they take a hit on your credit or your FICO score? So I know late payments and credit reporting does not discriminate. So can you just reiterate your answer for that?
Absolutely. So, you know, the way it's supposed to happen and the way it will happen, of course, are always very different, unfortunately. If they have agreed to a forbearance of any kind, then per the CARES Act, it is not allowable to be placed late as long as you were not derogatory or late months prior. So the status shall not change on your payment. It's supposed to not change. And now good luck getting the creditors to actually abide by that. And of course, that's where we're going to come in and start disputing late payments off of credit. But I just wanted to remind everyone that the word forbearance itself on the credit report, even if it doesn't create a 30-day late necessarily, mortgage guidelines, to Bill's point earlier, could very much be impacted by those words. And if there's anything, if history repeats itself, oftentimes that is treated much like a short sale or foreclosure or even a deed in lieu or bankruptcy. So underwriting guidelines could absolutely be impacted by that. And again, my biggest concern is that the assumption by consumers that they're automatically allowed to not make payments. And I'm hearing things all across the board from 30 days, 90 days, 360 days. So it's a little concerning. But as of now, we just need to make sure everyone's, number one, calling, getting everything in writing, and then at that point, monitoring their credit to make certain that there are no 30-day lates.
Thank you, Tiffany. And the last one is from Lloyd Meisen. I'm not 100% sure who he's asking here, but it says, when is it appropriate to physically show a property to a potential buyer versus a virtual showing? Lloyd, can you clarify maybe who you were asking, or was that a statement, not a question? Or
Yeah, that was to Mark Carlson. So and he answered that earlier. Sure. It's in our chat here. And it's just I think that the spirit of that is that do everything as virtual as you can. And when you have your disclosures and your disclaimers all put together and your seller is willing to have people come into the house, then do that. But vet, I think the spirit of this, again, is to vet your buyers with virtual showings. And then when they've identified, weeded out is the word that Mark used, what they're interested in, then start looking to arrange physical showings.
Okay. And then we have another question for Gene. It asks, on his calls with DC, has Larry Kudlow been asked about the long-term impact of the federal stimulus on the national debt, and by extension, how that will affect inflation, interest rates, and et cetera?
He has not addressed that on any of the calls that I've been on. Now, obviously, that's a concern. And I think that, the flip side of that is obviously what the Fed is doing with their buybacks and their extensions as well. But no, I think everybody's just kind of looking at that right now. People understand in the back of their mind that there's going to be this $2 trillion. That's a lot to add at a time when the national debt is already increasing exponentially. But I think everybody understands that it's really necessary right now. And so they're not really questioning why. I mean, you saw some of the grief last week when people were standing up and saying, we're not going to vote for this, or there's too much pork in here, or, we need to delay this, and everybody was taking a hit. So it was just kind of a fast moving train that everybody pretty much had to get on board with. So there hasn't really been any discussion of that, just understanding that, yeah, there will be long-term consequences of that. But I think what people are looking at is you don't want to make the cure worse than the disease. And that's what we're hearing from a lot of fronts right now, is that there needs to be some balance. There are really three legs to this stool. The first, of course, is the medical and scientific, which is paramount right now. However, lurking in the background is also the concern, as the president has said many times, you have the economic portion of this as well. We cannot, the economy, not just nationally, but worldwide, has taken a major hit from this. And Kudlow was saying this morning that they are believing, much like the housing industry, that there will be a pent-up demand, and that once this is behind us, there will be a rush again to add employment. There will be a rush to buy houses, and I'll be putting together the numbers here in the next couple of days for what March did. And then the third leg of that, of course, is you've got the medical scientific, you've got the economic, but we can't get anywhere in this country without the political leg of the stool also. And that's kind of the one that sometimes does more harm than good. In fact, often does more harm than good. They create a problem, and then they create a solution to the problem, which creates additional problems. But that's what we're dealing with right now. And so the medical scientific has taken the lead in this right now. The economic is a secondary consideration along with the political, but yeah, we're going to have to deal with that at some point. The impact to interest rates long-term, bond rates, we're seeing the gyrations in the stock market with some strengthening in the last couple days. So I think everybody is just kind of playing it by ear right now and not worrying too much about some of the spending, which will come back to haunt us down the road. But yeah, that's the way it is.
Thank you, Gene. That's actually all of the questions that I got, you guys.
All right, thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, Gene, Mark, Lloyd, Destry, Kale, Lisa, Tyson, Garen, Tiffany, Matthew, and Bill, and Scott. We so appreciate your information. We will be sending out a recap email. This was recorded, so we will have a clickable link as well if you'd like to share. And we will also attach some frequently asked questions about some of our respective industries that may be helpful information for you. So with that, thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful day.